Services has a new leader following months of calls for former Secretary Vincent Schiraldi's removal.
I'm thankful for the service of Secretary Schiraldi, but I'm excited about the new direction.
And now the question on everyone's mind is whether the department's new head can bring change to the juvenile justice system.
I am very hopeful, but until the proof is there, I'm going to hold my breath.
I'm going in depth on the issues inside DJS and sitting down with some of Maryland's top prosecutors to talk about some of the changes they want to see. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Fox 45 News In Depth. I'm Mikenzie Frost. The Department of Juvenile Services seeing a major shakeup amid ongoing juvenile crime across the state. For months, leaders in law enforcement, lawmakers, and residents have called for change as juvenile violence spurs chaos in their communities. Governor Wes Moore finally acting on those concerns and ordering DJS Secretary Vincent Schiraldi's resignation at a news conference Thursday. He said he's grateful for Schiraldi's leadership, but it's time for the department to move in a new direction.
I have a very high bar and I have very low patience. And so the thing that we will see is we are going to focus on accountability. We are going to focus on making sure that we can do rehabilitation where we can do rehabilitation. And we need to also focus on things like facilities and operational functions that I'm really excited about what Acting Secretary Betsy Tolantino is going to be able to bring to the department. I'm thankful for the service of Secretary Schiraldi, but I'm excited about the new direction that we're going.
Last month, Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates told Fox 45 News his office is seeing a similar amount of juvenile cases compared to this time last year. His data shows 84% of juveniles involved in more serious offenses were released. Bates is also questioning the data coming from DJS.
A number of people are saying juvenile arrests are down. But if the police are arresting you and diverting you, it's still an arrest. We can't say that's down.
Is there concern that that data is not accurate given the diversion programs and how some of that information is translated?
1,000%. Where my team is seeing an influx of juveniles being arrested, now DJS is telling the world that the arrests are down. However, if the police are arresting them and they're diverting them, it's still an arrest. That would mean DJS was not properly giving us the information, which means their data is flawed and we could not rely on their data.
Baltimore police also say juvenile suspects make up a large portion of their arrests for robberies and auto thefts, pointing out a group of around 50 kids and teens who they say are repeat offenders in the city, arrested and released over and over again. We've heard from many residents who tell us they want to see more accountability for young offenders. Several of them were victims of juvenile crime themselves and want to look past the politics to solve the problem.
I guess I'm not understanding what the politics about it is because, I'm a Democrat. We're all Democrats here. If the drive is that we don't want to lock kids up in jail, okay, that's whatever policy that might be, whatever the reasons behind that might be, sure. But then my question is, what's the plan?
It's wrong, and these kids got to be held responsible.
Many are now hoping Acting Secretary Betsy Fox Tolantino can help turn the department around after controversy plagued Schiraldi throughout his 2-year tenure as head of DJS. Schiraldi's policies often face criticism for being too lenient and not holding young offenders accountable. Vincent Schiraldi's time in Maryland started 2.5 years ago when then Governor-elect Wes Moore tapped Schiraldi to lead the Department of Juvenile Services as he started filling out his cabinet. Moore calling Schiraldi a national leader in criminal justice. Then the controversy surrounding Schiraldi took off. Confirmation votes, while successful, coming with words of warning from Democrats in control of the General Assembly.
I'm supporting this nominee, but I do have words of caution for this department and for this nominee.
Republicans have long argued Schiraldi did not bring enough accountability with him to the job.
We're not really holding young people accountable the way we should.
Fox 45 News questioning Schiraldi himself about a Washington Post op-ed he penned nearly a decade earlier, indicating young people should not face the adult criminal justice system until they're 21, possibly even 25 years old.
That was brought up during the confirmation hearing. Some lawmakers had concerns about that and your views
as a secretary for an agency plagued with problems. Do you see their concerns?
Many agencies are plagued with problems. It's not just DJS has problems and nobody else has problems. Everything else is perfect.
But you're the secretary of this.
When you look at, right, so you're asking me a question you want me to answer, right? So let me answer the question. If you ask most of your viewers, how different were you, particularly the men, at the age of 17 versus the age of 19? Were you dramatically more ready to engage in adult responsibility and adult behaviors when you were a freshman or a sophomore in college than you were when you were a senior in high school? I think most people would say no.
There were months of high-profile incidents involving young people committing crimes while Schiraldi was at the helm, like this one of 66-year-old Bernie, seen lying motionless on the ground while his daughter screamed for help. Or when ankle monitors were thrust into the spotlight following several examples of young people getting arrested for one crime while wearing an ankle monitor already under DJS supervision. Like Kristen Jackson, one suspect involved in Baltimore's worst mass shooting in history at the Brooklyn Day block party. FOX45 News investigating DJS's use of ankle monitors only to find out more kids were under supervision than the agency previously told the public, all while Schiraldi stood by the agency's efforts. What do you say to the families of these victims and the victims themselves who say that this isn't working and that your policies are prioritizing the safety and protection of the offenders as opposed to them and their families in the community?
A family whose loved one has been harmed may or may not be, happy with what I'm saying right now, but I want them at least to understand that we are trying to improve public safety. We're trying to do it by holding kids accountable and by turning their lives around and rehabilitating them, and that most often that's working well.
FOX45 News questioning Governor Moore about whether he would make a change as community members begged for answers. Does he have your support right now?
He's still on the job right now.
How much longer are you willing to stand by the Secretary, Vincent Schiraldi, of that department?
Well, I think we have to both remember that DJS is a department that was and still is a place in need of real reforms.
So how can you be confident that DJS is actually providing the level of services necessary?
Well, I can tell you that there has been a very real increase in the way you do accountability.
When is the governor's office going to take action? So what do you say to them? Then, suddenly, Governor Moore, in a news release June 9th, announced Schiraldi was out, telling the radio it was his call.
This was my decision. I ordered his resignation.
The governor says searching for a new leader had been in the works for some time.
I did it because, we've been talking for a while. I knew that I did not want daylight between making the decision around Secretary Schiraldi and also making sure that we have someone deeply qualified and ready to take on the role. And that takes time. But I knew that we had to be able to move faster, and I want faster results.
But the governor did not provide a specific answer to the one question: what was his breaking point? Back in February, Schiraldi was grilled by lawmakers about a report detailing the lack of oversight and tracking of performance metrics for programs DJS sends kids to for services. There, we questioned him about his future with the department.
The governor has been consistently supportive, and as long as he is, and as long as I feel like I am achieving the kinds of things that will help make Maryland a safer place and help rehabilitate young people, I'm going to keep doing this job.
Has there been any conversations with the governor about looking for other employment on your behalf?
No, there has not.
We asked to interview Governor Moore about the Schiraldi news, but his office said he wasn't available. Governor Moore tapping Betsy Fox Tolantino to take over the agency tangled in turmoil. Tolantino started her career in 2005 as a public defender. She joined the Department of Juvenile Services in 2011 as the Director of Legislation, and in 2021, she became the newly created Deputy Secretary of Community Operations. In 2022, she left the public sector to join ROCA, a nonprofit working to reduce violence among high-risk youth. There, she managed juvenile justice initiatives.
Good morning, everybody.
FOX45 News previously profiled ROCA. seeing firsthand the work the organization does with young people.
I've known Betsy for like the past decade.
Arch McCowan says he's seen Tolantino's efforts with young offenders in the community.
There are a handful of kids. We had a kid involved in a crew of armed robberies here, carjackings. Roca was able to reach that kid. They're not out doing any of the stuff that they were doing anymore. That was Betsy that helped coordinate that.
Governor Moore says he picked Tolantino for a slew of reasons, including his confidence in her ability to help change a toxic culture inside DJS.
Well, I believe under the new secretary's leadership that we've got to improve the quality of the facilities, because that's going to help to drive better outcomes for our young people.
Independent monitoring reports repeatedly indicate severe staffing shortages have resulted in employees and juveniles inside facilities feeling unsafe. Contraband at facilities, including the Baltimore City Juvenile Justice Center, remain a major concern as well. Turning DJS around will be a tall task for Tolantino.
So we had an agency that was depleted of resources, depleted of morale, depleted of personnel. But my expectations are high and my patience is low.
Fox 45 News has relentlessly reported on concerns within the walls of the facilities. Most recently, a whistleblower telling Fox 45 the Director of Educational Operations, Executive Director of Committed Programs, and the Deputy Director of DJS were all replaced under Secretary Schiraldi. The longtime employee claims these new hires have been connected to Schiraldi in some capacity, and the staff changes inside the department have contributed to the agency, quote, falling apart, according to the veteran DJS employee. A change in leadership at the top is welcome news to many.
Governor, thanks for finally getting around to something that we all thought should have happened. But the reality is, everybody knew that there was mismanagement at DJS.
I'm very cautiously optimistic.
Better late than never.
This has been a long time coming.
But without sweeping changes,
I certainly think we have to make broad-scale changes at the department.
If they put her in and they don't change the policies, basically it's just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
It's not clear the direction of the department will be any different. We reached out to Secretary Schiraldi following his resignation, but he has not agreed to an interview. He did speak with our sister station in Washington, D.C., blaming the media for what he sees and is an exaggeration of the juvenile crime crisis. Schiraldi specifically called out Fox 45 News for our reporting, which highlighted ongoing instances of juvenile violence and property crime in communities across Maryland.
The media, the news media, was exaggerating juvenile crime as a proportion of crime and was covering juvenile crime more, even though juvenile crime was on the decline, and that Fox 45 was in a league of its own in terms of how much more frequently they were covering juvenile crime as a percentage than its actual percentage.
Despite Secretary Schiraldi's claims about media coverage of juvenile crime, he's often avoided speaking to the press, including Fox 45 News. Last October, I asked Schiraldi on a Zoom call about juvenile crime concerns amid growing calls for his resignation, but the department shut us down.
Actually, I do have some concerns. We were working on a statement specifically for you all at Fox 45 to ensure that you didn't get left out with getting nothing out of this.
We did get left out, Mike. Obviously, I called you multiple times and sent you a text, and you didn't respond. That's obviously an issue that we will have to address. While I'm here, though, I would just like to ask.
I'm gonna let you guys work this out, and when it's time for me to come back on,
Secretary,
I'll come back on, but I think Mike needs to work it out.
Okay, I see Secretary Schiraldi just jumped off, so. That wasn't the first time Schiraldi dodged our questions. In January 2024, Schiraldi walked away when Fox 45's Project Baltimore pressed him on a 15-year-old admitted rapist was allowed to return to Patterson High School. DJS recommended probation for the 15-year-old rather than any time in a DJS facility. We pressed Schiraldi about his proposal to end sex offender registries, but he didn't answer the question. Even though Schiraldi shifted blame onto the media, lawmakers took issue with the way he ran the department. During the last legislative session, lawmakers held hearings with Schiraldi, which grew tense at times. At one point, Democratic Senator Jeff Waldstreicher pressed the secretary about how DJS defines recidivism.
If someone does something bad and then does it a second time, most people would say, yes, that person has recidivated.
Done it another time, from the standpoint of this august body, is an interesting phrase. And I am not a lawyer, and I don't mean to parse, but Senator, when do we define that someone's done something?
My point is, if someone does something and then does it again, and you resolve an intake or informal that everyone in this room and everyone watching at home would say that person reoffended.
Several states' attorneys are talking about the changes they want from DJS's new leader. Coming up, I sat down with City State's Attorney Ivan Bates to talk about what he wants to see moving forward. Governor Wes Moore ordering former Secretary Schiraldi's resignation of DJS comes as a win for several states' attorneys across Maryland, including Carroll County State's Attorney Haven Shoemaker.
Frankly, that's our job as the state's attorneys across the state, is to look out for the greater interest of the community at large. And it's kind of hard to do that when you're not kept in the loop on issues. And we weren't under Vincent Schiraldi.
While in Ocean City for a States Attorneys Association conference, I sat down with Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates to talk about his juvenile crime concerns and what he wants to see from the new leader of DJS. Do you believe that the replacement of Vincent Schiraldi at the Department of Juvenile Services came too late?
Well, I put it like this. I think not just myself, but the organization, States Attorneys Association, we were talking and we had brought up the issue about it was time for replacement. At the end of the day, I'm not going to second guess the decision of the governor, but this is an issue that I think myself and my colleagues had witnessed a while ago.
What are you looking forward to now that there is an acting secretary, Mikenzie Frost Tolantino? What are you hoping that she brings to the department?
Well, look, we're cautiously optimistic, but we also want to make sure that they have a robust plan for services for the young people. Not just saying it, but doing it. Having DJS, through a policy, tweak some of their policies. For instance, when a young person is arrested, and it could be a crime of violence or a handgun, those types of felonies, under the way the system is, that young person could possibly see the court within 2 days. However, DJS, we've realized, was releasing some of these young people before seeing the court. They would say, hey, come back tomorrow. Some of the young people just weren't coming back. And so now we would hope that DJS would change their policy, and their policy would be every single young person that has one of these felony-style cases, a violent felony or a handgun case, would in fact be held until the judge could see them. We feel if this one little tweak could happen, then we think that we could hopefully move in the right direction and holding young people accountable.
During your speech, you said that one of the things that you want to do as president of the association moving forward is speak up more and have a bigger presence in Annapolis moving forward. And you said that when bad laws are passed, it impacts everybody, especially when it comes to the juvenile justice system. What bad laws are you talking about?
I think everybody needs to understand the quote-unquote elephant in the room, direct file. So a juvenile could technically be charged with murder or attempt murder or a rape or a felony, and it would be in juvenile court. We would never know the outcome of what happened to that case. And this is a case that would greatly impact the community.
City State's Attorney Ivan Bates is talking about starting most cases in the juvenile court system instead of the current system of violent cases starting in adult court. It's been a priority for the Legislative Black Caucus and was pushed this last General Assembly session. Bates says the current Department of Juvenile Services is not equipped to handle the number of kids now, let alone more if all cases were sent to DJS.
DJS had their act together. If they had great services, great program, they had a history and a track record of even great turning these young people around. They had placement centers that were longer than, say, 2 months or 6 months, but they had placement centers that could potentially be there 2, 3, 4, 5 years to hold young people accountable, to give them the service they need. Then this would be a different question. There's a lot of problems, a number of issues. We need to make sure DJS, the new secretary, has the opportunity to fix the system. There's a lot of work. Now, we definitely applaud Governor Moore because he's done a lot to try to get the system up to speed.
One of the things that Vincent Schiraldi also said was one of his regrets on his way out the door was that he wasn't able to end mass incarceration in the state. Do you believe Maryland is on track for mass incarceration?
I think Mr. Schiraldi has a skewed view of what mass incarceration is. What I know is this. Look, many people know I was a criminal defense attorney. So I've seen and understood what mass incarceration would look like. You know, a person with marijuana, next thing you know, we're sending them in jail for a year. You know, things like that. But sending violent offenders who repeat violent offenders to jail, that does not constitute mass incarceration. If Mr. Schiraldi was more of a partner with the prosecutors across the state, this would have been a different conversation with him.
Well, that's one of the things the governor said that he's looking forward to and he wants the next secretary to do is to build those relationships, and for acting Secretary Tolantino to build the partnership with the prosecutors, with the law enforcement leaders across the state. What does that partnership look like to you?
Well, the partnership, you have to sit down, you have to talk, you have to understand we may not agree on everything, but what can we agree on? What are the basic tenets that we agree on? Number one is simple. We love children because they're our children. They're our future.
Other states' attorneys are also expressing concern about juvenile crime in their jurisdictions. Howard County State's Attorney Rich Gibson argues DJS leadership contributed to issues statewide.
So everyone is concerned about juvenile crime. There's no one in this role as prosecutor that's not concerned about juvenile crime. It isn't an urban issue or a suburban issue or rural issue. It's an everywhere issue. And everyone believes that we need more resources, and everyone believes that we were heading in the wrong direction because the philosophy at the head was wrong.
Some states' attorneys say they want to see more programs and services for young offenders. They're hoping DJS's new secretary can bring those changes to the justice system.
I have said for years, and this predates Mr. Schiraldi's term, that the juvenile justice system is broken in Maryland. I've said there's not enough programs, not enough facilities, not enough counselors, and therefore our children are not being well served.
How are you hopeful that this new chapter will bring some of those changes?
Oh, I am very hopeful. But until the proof is there, I'm going to hold my breath.
I'm hopeful, but I think we have to change and we have to offer services for young people. They're our future, and we don't want to see young people getting into trouble.
This week, we asked your message to the new Secretary of DJS and what you want to see her prioritize. We'll take a look at your responses after the break.
Here's tonight's primetime lineup on Fox 45. Brought to you locally by your McDonald's owner-operators.
This week we asked, what's your message to the new Secretary of DJS and what would you like to see her prioritize? Let's take a look at some of your responses. Joan says work with state's attorneys' offices as they have the knowledge and experience to determine whether to detain or send back into the community. And Mitchell says hold parents accountable. If you don't see your messages up here, make sure that you are keeping your comments appropriate for TV, and be sure to keep those comments flowing so we can have everyone included in our tag board and at the end of the show. That's it for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mikenzie Frost.